So Chris,
Yes, sir.
FM 102 had an amazing track record as far as programming and getting great ratings. I mean, it was number one just almost all the time throughout the 80s. Tell me about it, starting with Gillette. What was the secret to FM 102 transforming from the music FM, whatever that was, to FM 102, which was basically the Valley's number one?
A lot of FM 102's success were that Gillette and I were two peas in a pod. We were both ultra hyper, ultra focused, ultra passionate about what we did. And Gillette grew up in Bakersfield when it was a bedroom community of LA, even though we know that it's not really a bedroom community of LA, but it was. Radio at night boomed into Bakersfield. And for people that don't understand radio, and the ones that do, understand what I'm talking about. Okay, there were great influences for some in the 60s, some in the 70s. For Gillette and I think he's 2 years older than me, so it would be the same way. For me, I grew up in Santa Clara when it was 18,000. My grandfather was the first mayor of Santa Clara. My great-grandfather founded Santa Clara.
Wow.
So
what was his name?
My great-grandfather was Robert Roll, and my grandfather was Robert B. Roll. So Santa Clara, same thing. KFRC was a major influence. KSFO was a major influence to me. And then KSAN, of course, was a major influence to me. So I think keeping that in mind, Gillette had the influences of KHJ, KFWB. I mean, he had that top 40 breeding put into him. Plus, Bakersfield was a great top 40 market. Okay, during his growing up, they had great broadcasters there. Kathy was a great radio station. It battled another station. Same in the Bay Area. KLIV was the San Jose station that battled for supremacy of San Jose and tried to block KYA and KFRC out. So I think that had a part with it. Okay, and then other people may say, "What does that got to do with Sacramento?" It has everything to do with it. Okay, so when the two ships met, I mean, Gillette and I rarely had to discuss anything. We knew exactly where we were going, what had to be done in the marketplace. And, it was real simple. Gillette led. Gillette, he inspired people because he was passionate, but he didn't get too far out of bounds either way, or I'd smack him back, and whatever he didn't lead with, I led with. So he smacked me back. So there was an understanding. I never usurped his authority, ever. We had guys that came in from other places, thought they were going to do things, but guess what? That radio station on air was my staff, okay? I was the one that made it happen. From the programming standpoint, the Music FM and this guy Manders had driven it so far bad that when we ran him out and Duffy Broadcasting came in, we were still unionized. So the morning show, I was making $35,000 a year as a morning show guy with a 10-share radio station. The overnight person was making $32,000 a year. This is how ridiculous it was, and I ran out the union, and I promised them that they were freaked out, Duffy and Greenberg. I said, "I'll blow the union out." They're like, "Don't tell us this. No, we can't be part of this," and we did. When one vote, I got him out, and I was the one that orchestrated that, and I told them, "If you guys don't vote it out, I'll work to get each one of you fired. Okay, I'll bury each one of you, because we're never going to make any money as a staff. We're never going to grow if we have a union here. Okay, because unions shouldn't have been in radio in this marketplace, market 26 or 27.
They have a deadening effect.
Well, they did then.
Yeah.
Okay, now if I'm in New York, it's a different story. Okay, if I'm in Los Angeles, San Francisco, to a degree, it's different. Sacramento, it was just an excuse. So the programming of it, Gillette and I had this belief that Michael Jackson, okay, Prince a couple of years earlier,
1999.
of course, everything had changed, right? I mean, top 40 radio wasn't being done right, and the other key was that AM radio was dying a slow, painful death.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't throw everything at the wall, but he and I also felt that the market would succeed in a urban sense, very much more urban than it would white. And with KZAP,
in other words, a hybrid of CHR and urban.
Correct. Yeah. And with KZAP doing the Superstars format, there was no really reason. Whereas in the 70s, Croy could play Bachman Turner Overdrive into Bad Company, into the Spinners, into Pilot out of Australia, into Dionne Warwick. That wasn't going to work in the 80s with everything that had been sort of pigeonholed. So we were right. We guessed right. I also had...
Also, just a little footnote, you and I share a little bit of history. We both came from roller rinks.
Yeah.
We were roller rink DJs.
Yeah.
Do you think that had any impact?
Of course it did. I was at 14, I was a roller rink DJ because I was doing regular radio. It has a big thing because at that time, rinks were... they were like what a record store would be. You were either going into record stores to walk around and listen to what Tower or the record factory or the record plant or whatever, or the warehouse was playing in the store, or you were at a rink and you were skating and you were listening to music. So there was a street vibe to that. Okay, that now
there was a flow to music too.
Of course,
yeah.
You know, now you have raves. Okay, if you want to get into the techno side of it, hip hop, you have house parties. I mean, and obviously I'm making this a little bit. I don't want to say granular, but I mean it's not as simple as that, but it is as simple as that, is what I'm saying.
It's about culture.
Yeah, and that was the other thing.
Dance culture, I guess.
Well, that was the other thing that we did. I mean, I had a vibe for the street there, and I knew that we hadn't done radio right since I'd been there from March of '80, that we hadn't grown with the times. So we hit it. I mean, you know, we blew that station up. I'll never forget June 1. We took off horrible music, and we were out, you know, I mean, Duran Duran, you know, every hour, you know, Michael 4 times an hour. I mean, you know, when Madonna hit in November of '83, no one wanted to play her. You know, Scott was in New York at Z100, a couple of people were, and, you know, we were the only people in Northern California that would even touch Madonna. I say that with no pun intended. Everybody has since, I guess. But, you know, we actually helped her come back because
she was like a virgin back then.
Yeah, she was. She was definitely a stiff. So there were artists that we were taking chances on, and we were driving this format, which is now, you know, a lot of formats. So it was an interesting time. Very interesting.
Do you think it was the artist that drove the format, or was it other things?
I think artists helped, but I think it was the arrogance and audacity of Gillette and I together that we were going to do what we had to do to win. And it all, again, it started from the street. FM 102 was built on street presence because our owners wouldn't spend money. But you can't have that converted to ratings if you don't connect with the audience. And I think that's what made me ultimately a very, very good morning guy, no matter what markets I eventually worked in, was that I understood that it started on the street. And I think it's the #1 problem with radio today is that it's lost the ability to go out and connect on the street because radio's given up because phones, iPhones, Twittering, texting, they haven't figured out the formula that they need to fit inside of all of this to make it work. Instead, you have nerds that go on the air and they do one thing. You have people that say, don't promote that. We need to just stick to the standard radio forms. And you have salespeople that want to sell 37 minutes of ads per hour. They've lost its way in all of this, right? But back in the day, you play the right records, you're in people's faces, you work first to the audience, and then you come back to everything else. There was no way you weren't going to win, and big, which we did.
The Morning Zoo, a #1 show for many years. What was the Morning Zoo more about talk or music?
It was a mix. I knew I had limits. I knew that I could push hard, and I knew that if I wanted to make impact, I had to be a bit more controversial and cutting edge, which, I mean, we were way ahead of Stern and everybody. I mean, we were completely out in right field in this area, and it was successful. And I knew that as long as I met Gillette's needs, which were 6 records an hour, you can throw in a WOW record, which for me was a Motown record, because I was programming as well. And people forget that, you know, I had all the success, but I was also the ops program music director, so I understood what I was doing as well. I knew how to push one to pull on the other and vice versa. Yeah, I mean, you know, as long as we met that criteria, I thought we would have success, and we ultimately did.
Real quickly, how would you compare your programming in the 80s with what jocks did at, like, Earth Radio in the 70s?
I had a lot of comparisons. My background was freeform album rock radio. I grew up in a family that my sister listened to KMPX. My brother did. My brother was into Neil Young and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. My sister was into the Stones and then went into, you know, Dan Hicks and went into the Flying Burrito Brothers. And, you know, I grew up with Terry McGovern as a morning guy at KSAN, Don Rose, who was my ultimate idol at KFRC, and Don Sherwood at KSFO when I was a kid because my dad and mom loved him. So, yeah, it had a lot to do with it all as one. Freeform, I think, is the reason why Top 40 Radio worked eventually.